You look at your wrist. You check the digital numbers glowing at the top of your phone screen. You feel a sudden spike of physical panic because those digits read 8:46 instead of 8:30. You accelerate your pace down the concrete sidewalk, your heart rate increasing by 12 beats per minute. You assume your stress is a natural reaction to being late for an appointment. The real answer is far stranger. Your acute anxiety is a recent invention, a byproduct of a biological organism trying to live inside an artificial grid that did not exist for 99% of human history. Every time you rush to beat a deadline, you are fighting a battle against your own biology. You are a natural creature forced to march to the mechanical rhythm of an industrial machine. Why did your ancestors spend millennia ignoring the concept of an hour? To understand this ancient world, look at the evidence left behind in the Blombos Cave on the southern coast of South Africa. In 2002, archaeologist Dr. Christopher Henshelwood excavated a piece of red ochre engraved with a series of distinct abstract geometric lines dating back 73,000 years. These early humans did not track minutes, nor did they count 60 seconds to structure their morning. They observed the physical transformations of their immediate environment, relying on natural cues like the migration of specific birds or the changing texture of plant life. Your ancestors experienced duration as a fluid sequence of events, rather than a series of rigid blocks. They lived in an era of task orientation, a concept defined by historian E.P. Thompson in his 1967 study on industrial work patterns. People performed actions until those actions were complete, stopping when the light faded or when the meat was cured. It was a lifestyle governed by necessity. What caused humanity to abandon this natural rhythm? The shift began with the transition to agriculture around 12,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. Farmers needed to know when to plant wheat and when to harvest it before the winter rains ruined the crop. In 1925, excavations at the ancient city of Ur in modern-day Iraq revealed early administrative clay tablets tracking the lunar cycle to coordinate collective labor. These early calendars did not regulate personal life, functioning instead as loose frameworks for seasonal religious festivals. Your brain still carries the neural architecture designed for this seasonal existence, relying on your suprachiasmatic nucleus, a tiny region of the brain in the hypothalamus containing 20,000 neurons that regulates your circadian rhythm. This internal clock syncs with the natural rise and fall of the sun using blue light frequencies. It does not understand the arbitrary concept of a time zone. How did a species guided by the sun become subservient to a metal spring? In the year 1370, the city of Cologne, Germany, erected one of the first public mechanical striking clocks in Europe to coordinate the daily shifts of paid laborers. Before this invention, people measured the passing of the day using sundials or water clocks, devices that inherently stretched and compressed hours depending on the season, making summer hours longer than winter hours. The mechanical clock changed everything by standardizing the duration of an hour, making it exactly the same length regardless of the sun's position. Sociologist Lewis Mumford argued in his 1934 text that the clock, not the steam engine, was the key machine of the modern industrial age. It turned human effort into a measurable commodity that could be bought and sold by the minute. Your ancestors began to experience time as a scarce resource that could be wasted, lost, or spent. This created a profound psychological shift. Do you see how this shift altered your daily behavior? This standardization reached its peak on November 18, 1883, a day known as the Day of Two Noons, when North American railroads instituted 4 standard time zones to replace the 8,000 local times used by different towns. Before this event, every city set its own clocks to noon when the sun reached its highest point in the local sky, meaning that New York and Boston were separated by several minutes. Economist Dr. William Nordhaus tracked the acceleration of human productivity following this change, demonstrating a direct correlation between standardized scheduling and increased psychological stress metrics in modern populations. You inherited the world built by those railroad managers. You wake up to an alarm clock that interrupts your natural sleep cycle, forcing your body out of deep, REM sleep because an arbitrary grid demands your presence at a specific desk. Your nervous system interprets this constant temporal pressure as a chronic threat, flooding your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. Why do you accept this pressure as normal? To measure the depth of this shift, consider how early industrial factories in 18th century England had to actively train adults to understand clocks. Historian Dr. Douglas Reed published a 1986 paper detailing the phenomenon of Saint Monday, a custom where workers simply refused to show up on the first day of the week because they preferred to balance their work with leisure according to personal physical energy levels rather than a clock face. Factory owners responded by locking workers inside factories and using fines to break this non-linear lifestyle. Your modern workplace wellness anxiety is the direct descendant of those 18th century disciplinary fines. Your brain experiences a persistent cognitive friction because it is attempting to map a biological body that functions in undulating biological cycles onto a flat, non-negotiable mathematical timeline. This friction manifests as chronic fatigue. When was the last time you allowed your body to wake up without a mechanical intervention? Anthropologist Dr. Edward T. Hall defined two distinct cultural approaches to duration in his 1983 study, separating societies into monochronic and polychronic systems. Monochronic systems treat the timeline as a linear highway where tasks must be isolated and completed one by one inside strict slots, which matches your current daily schedule. Polychronic systems, found in many traditional Mediterranean and indigenous American cultures, treat duration as a point where multiple events occur simultaneously based on interpersonal relationships and situational readiness. If a meeting in a polychronic society is scheduled for the afternoon, it begins when all the necessary participants arrive and feel prepared, not when a mechanical pointer hits a specific number. Your stress is not an inevitable part of the human condition. It is a specific cultural preference that has been globalized by international corporate structures. What would your life look like if you measured success by the completion of an activity rather than the speed of its execution? Consider the physiological consequences of living by the second, as documented by Dr. Robert Sapolsky in his research on stress hormones at Stanford University. He found that primates experience elevated stress markers when they cannot predict or control their immediate environment, a state that modern humans replicate daily by tracking deadlines they do not control. Your ancestors on the savannah faced intense short-term stressors like a predator attack that lasted 5 minutes, after which their cortisol levels dropped back to baseline. You experience long-term, low-grade temporal stress that lasts 16 hours a day because your calendar app constantly signals that you are running out of minutes. This persistent psychological state alters your digestive function, decreases your immune response, and damages your cardiovascular tissue over decades of continuous exposure. You are running from a phantom predator that lives entirely inside your digital calendar. How do you escape a threat that you carry in your pocket? The global synchronization of human behavior reached its absolute limits with the introduction of atomic clocks in 1955 at the National Physical Laboratory in the United Kingdom. These devices measure time using the microwave signal emitted by electrons changing energy levels in cesium-133 atoms, splitting a single second into exactly 9,192,631,770 oscillations. This level of precision allows global financial networks to execute millions of automated stock trades in a fraction of a millisecond, completely removing human biology from the loop of economic activity. You are trying to compete with network architectures operating at the speed of light, while your primate nervous system still requires 8 hours of dark, quiet rest to function properly. This structural imbalance produces the modern phenomenon of burnout, which is the exhaustion of a biological organism attempting to match the performance metrics of a cesium atom. You are penalizing yourself for failing to meet an impossible, non-biological standard. Why do you look at your phone with a sense of personal failure? You are not late because you are disorganized. You are anxious because you are an organic being trying to survive inside a mathematical abstraction that has no basis in the physical universe. Your daily schedule is an artificial construct built to maximize industrial output, not to preserve your mental well-being. You check your phone once more, watching the digital numbers click forward by one single digit. You recognize now that the panic you feel is not a flaw in your character, but the protest of a hunter-gatherer trapped inside a minute hand. You look at your wrist.